Did you know that many retirees today are technically millionaires? In fact, many of you watching are technically millionaires, even if it doesn't feel like it. So, today we're going to explore what it means to be wealthy in retirement. And we're going to look at some data from the federal government that I think may be surprising to some of you. But first, my name is Kevin Lum. I'm a certified financial planner, and this channel is dedicated to helping a million people retire without worry. Often, when I meet with future clients, they'll ask how they're doing, and I'll make a joke about what a privilege it is to meet with millionaires. Why? Well, because when you add up your investments and the future value of Social Security, the equity in your home, and maybe even a pension, many people have crossed $1 million in net worth, even if it doesn't feel like it. When I was a kid, the idea of becoming a millionaire seemed like this incredibly distant dream. Millionaires were the people who lived in the big house on the edge of town. But today, most millionaires aren't living lavish lifestyles. They're ordinary people who often worry if they can afford to retire. Sometimes, when I mention retirement spending of around $10,000 a month, viewers will comment on the channel, what are they doing? Eating caviar for every meal? But the truth is, feeling wealthy, it's relative. The other day, I was walking around our neighborhood and I noticed a modest 1,600 square foot home on a street that wasn't even very nice, listed for $2.4 million. Where I grew up, that amount to this day would get you the biggest house on the block, plus you'd have a lot of money left over. Like I said, it's all relative. But with that in mind, let's take a look at some eye-opening data from the Federal Reserve on household wealth or household net worth for Americans age 65 and older. And just to clarify, this is household net worth, not individual net worth. And a couple of other things that are worth noting before we dive in. Net worth is everything you own, so your home, your retirement accounts, investment accounts, bank savings, valuable items, minus everything you owe, your debt. So things like mortgage, credit card balances, and other loans. So when we're talking about net worth, it's assets minus liabilities. So if you're trying to figure out your own net worth, what you want to do is on one side of the page, write down all of your assets, bank accounts, and the value of your home. And then on the other side, you'll want to write down all of your liabilities. And when you take the assets minus liabilities, that gives you your net worth. One of the things that's important to note, we're going to be talking about the median today, not the mean. The mean or the average net worth can be misleading because it includes extremely wealthy individuals. It includes the 1%, which can dramatically skew numbers upwards and make people feel way worse off about their position in life than they really are. The median net worth, on the other hand, represents the middle household. So half have more, half have less, which I think provides a clearer picture of the typical retiree's situation. The data we're going to be talking about today comes from the Federal Reserve, and I'll put a link to this website in the description below, but you can sort by various elements. In this particular situation, we're going to look at age, and I'm looking at 65 and older. And I've seen some other YouTube videos talking about this data, but often using the numbers from 2019. And one of the really interesting things is how much the average net worth or the median net worth, these are the median numbers here, how much the median net worth has increased over the past few years. So in 2019, the median net worth was about $308,000 for someone aged 65 to 75. But what you see is today in 2022, that number had jumped to 410,000, which was a 33% increase in just those 3 years. That's a really significant jump. So we have 410,000 is the median net worth, meaning 50% of retirees have more and 50% have less. But I also want to look at percentiles a bit more. But before we talk about percentiles, I want to explain just quickly what it means, because some people are like, what do you mean by percentiles? Imagine you're taking a test, 100 people are taking along with you, and you finish in 10th place. You just landed in the 90th percentile. Why 90th? Because the percentile tells us how you compare to everyone else. So if you're in the 90th percentile, you did better than 90% of the other people taking the test. It's the same with income or net worth. If your income is in the 90th percentile or your net worth is in the 90th percentile, you're better off than 90% of people in your cohort. If your net worth is in the 60th percentile, then you are better off financially than 60% of the other people in your age cohort. Percentiles aren't about exact numbers. They're about your position relative to other people in your cohort. And that's why they're a really powerful measure to help you know how are you doing. So here's a net worth breakdown for people aged 65 and older in 2022. And I had to do a little fancy math to get these numbers because I could not cross-tab the most recent data. So what I did is found some numbers on a website called MoneyWise from the 2019 study. And then what I did is I found out what the overall percentile increase was for the entire study for 2022 and inflated the numbers from 2019. So they're not exact, but I think they get us very close. So first of all, you have people in the bottom 10%. Typically, they have a negative net worth. So when you take their assets minus their liabilities, they have more debt than they do assets. And this group of people is going to be very dependent on Social Security. That's going to be their primary source of revenue in retirement. So Social Security, Medicare, and then their safety net is going to be Medicaid. So if they need long-term care or anything, it's going to be Medicaid. So then we have the bottom 25%, and the average net worth in that category for a retiree is about $50,000. This one is a little harder to inflate because actually, if you look at the overall study, so all age cohorts, people in the bottom 25% saw an 800% increase in their average net worth. They went from $100 or $150 to $3,400 in net worth. And my guess is a lot of that has to do with the COVID stimulus. So I couldn't increase the numbers from 2019 by 800% because then they would be really high. So it's a little hard to judge that, but we'll go ahead and go with the 2019 number, which is around $50,000. Then for the median, right? This is the middle of the pack. These are middle class people. This is straight in the middle of the pack. The approximate net worth, the average net worth in this cohort is 410,000, which is up 37% from 2019. Then we have the top 25%. So this is the upper middle class. And this cohort, the average net worth is around 1.3 to 1.4 million, which is up about 37% as well. So then the top 10%, which we would consider wealthy, have seen about a 26% increase in their net worth from 2019. And on average, it's about $2.4 million. And then we have the top 1%. It was, I think it was last election cycle or 2 election cycles ago, everyone always talked about the 1%, the dreaded 1%. And they're the uber wealthy, at least for the purposes of this study. And the 1% in retirement, so people over the age of 65, is their average net worth is 21 million, which is up about 26% from 2019. So hopefully this is helpful to you. These numbers aren't exact and they're not perfect, but hopefully it'll help you kind of benchmark how you're doing compared to other people in your age cohort. Interestingly, and this data comes from the Census Bureau, over 63% of household wealth for retirees comes from 2 areas: retirement accounts, 32%, and home equity, 31%. And then an additional 20% of wealth is in stocks, mutual funds, and bank accounts. And that's part of the reason we've seen such a large jump in the median net worth of retirees is because a lot of their assets are in the value of their home and in their retirement account. And so that's really driven up the median net worth for retirees. Now, interestingly, retirees compared to a generation ago are doing significantly better. One really interesting data point that I noticed is that if you look inflation adjusted at, retirees today compared to a generation ago. So when this study first came out in 1989 compared to today, retirees today are doing about twice as well as a generation ago. I think we could talk about that for a while, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, what it means is that people who are not invested in assets, if you don't own your own home and you don't have a significant amount of money in your retirement account, you just have not seen the same net worth growth as people who have assets and have seen those assets grow. But here's another critical piece of information that people often overlook. In fact, these numbers overlook, and that's the value of your Social Security and your pension. For example, if you receive a monthly Social Security check of $3,000 a month, inflation adjusted, using the 4% withdrawal rule, which I know isn't perfect, but it makes for easy math, to get $3,000 a month, inflation adjusted, you would need to have saved $900,000 to generate that same income. In fact, if someone offered you either $900,000 in cash or a guaranteed $3,000 per month of inflation protected income for the rest of your life, the secure monthly payment is pretty appealing, especially in a volatile market. So if you're watching this and thinking, "Ah, I'm behind, I am, whatever percentile you're in, and you're thinking all these other people are ahead of me," it's very possible your situation looks much better when you factor in Social Security and if you have a pension, and of course your home equity. And here's what's really interesting. I've reviewed plans for people with $3 million who are far less secure than people with $500,000 and Social Security and a paid off home. It truly depends on your unique situation. It depends on where you live, what part of the country you're in. So I started off this video talking about how wealth is relative. And the problem with these benchmarks is it doesn't take into account the relativity of wealth, right? If you live in an area of the country where it costs a lot less to live, you have $500,000 or $250,000 in Social Security, you could easily be better off than someone who lives in a coastal city who has $3 million saved. It depends on your specific situation. So get to know your numbers. If you watch my channel for any amount of time, what you'll hear me say over and over and over again is you need to know your numbers. You need to know your situation. So here's my advice. Stop comparing yourself to others. Instead, focus on your own numbers and understand if they make sense for your retirement goals and your lifestyle. And if you're watching this wondering, well, what numbers should I be looking at? You're in luck. I've got a video that talks about 5 numbers you need to know before you retire, and it will help you clearly define your path to a secure retirement.